Dunstaffnage Castle is a partially ruined castle in Argyll and Bute, Western Scotland. It lies 3 miles N.N.E.of Oban, situated on a platform of conglomerate rock on a promontory at the southwest of the entrance to Loch Etive, and is surrounded on 3 sides by the sea. The castle dates back to the 13th century, making it one of Scotland's oldest stone castles. In a local group which includes Castle Sween and Castle Tioram, guarding a strategic location, it was built by the MacDougall Lords of Lorne, and has been held since the 15th century by the Clan Campbell. To this day there is a hereditary captain of Dunstaffnage, although they no longer reside at the castle. Dunstaffnage is maintained by Historic Scotland, and is open to the public, although the 16th-century gatehouse is retained as the private property of the captain. The prefix Dun in the name means fortress in Gaelic, while the rest of the name derives from Norse Stafandis, headland of the star. History. Before Dunstaffnage. Before the construction of the castle, Dunstaffnage may have been the location of a Dalriatan stronghold, known as N.N.E.of. As early as the 7th century, it was recorded by John Monopony in 1612 that the Stone of Destiny was kept here after being brought from Ireland, and before it was moved to Scone Palace in 843. However, Iona and Dunad are considered more likely, given the known connections with Dalriatan and Strathclyde kings. Hector Boyce records that the stone was kept at Avonium, which has traditionally been identified with Dunstaffnage, although in 2010 the writer A. J. Morton identified Avonium with Irvine in Ayrshire. The MacDougalls. The castle itself was built in the second quarter of the 13th century, as the seat of Duncan MacDougall, Lord of Lorne and grandson of Somerled. Duncan was unsuccessfully attacked by his Norwegian-backed brother, Uspak, who later died in an attack on Rothesay Castle with Norse forces in the 1230s. He had also travelled to Rome in 1237, and was the founder of nearby Chatton Priory. Duncan's son Ewan MacDougall inherited his father's title in the 1240s, and expanded the MacDougall influence, styling himself King of the Isles. It is probable that Ewan built the 3 round towers onto the castle, and constructed and enlarged the hall inside. Following Alexander III's repulse of the Norse influence in Argyll, the MacDougalls backed the Scottish monarchy, and Ewan's son Alexander was made the first sheriff of Argyll in 1293. However, they supported the Balliol side during the Wars of Scottish Independence, which broke out a few years later. Robert Bruce defeated the Clan MacDougall at the Battle of the Pass of Brander in 1308–1309, and after a brief siege, took control of Dunstaffnage Castle. Royal fortress, now a crown property. Dunstaffnage was controlled by a series of keepers. James I seized the castle in 1431, following the Battle of Inverlochy, as his enemies were hiding inside. In 1455 James Douglas, 9th Earl of Douglas, stayed at Dunstaffnage, on his way to treat with John MacDonald, Lord of the Isles. This followed James II's attack on Douglas' power, and led to the signing of the Treaty of Westminster-Tornish. A later keeper, John Stewart of Lorne, was a rival of Alan MacDougall, and was stabbed by his supporters on his way to his marriage at Dunstaffnage Chapel in 1463, although he survived long enough to make his vows. Although MacDougall took the castle, he was ousted by James III, who granted Dunstaffnage to Colin Campbell, 1st Earl of Argyll, in 1470. Clan Campbell. The Earls of Argyll appointed captains to oversee Dunstaffnage and keep it in readiness. On the behalf, changes were made to the buildings, particularly the gatehouse, which was rebuilt around this time. The Campbells were loyal allies of the royal house, and Dunstaffnage was used as a base for government expeditions against the MacDonald lords of the Isles, among others. During the 15th and 16th centuries, James IV visited Dunstaffnage on 2 occasions. Dunstaffnage saw action during the Civil War, holding out against Montrose's army in 1644. The castle was burned by Royalist troops, following the failure of the rising of the 9th Earl of Argyll in 1685 against the Catholic James VII. During the Jacobite risings of 1715 and 1745, the castle was occupied by government troops. Flora MacDonald, who helped Bonnie Prince Charlie to escape from Scotland, was briefly imprisoned here while en route to imprisonment in London. Decline and restoration. The Campbells continued to add to the castle, building a new house over the Old West Range in 1725. However, the rest of the castle was already decaying. In 1810 an accidental fire gutted the castle, and the captain ceased to live here, moving to Dunstaffnage House, some 2 kilometers to the southeast, until this too burned down in 1940. Tenants lived in the 1725 house within the castle until 1888. Restoration work was undertaken in 1903 by the Duke of Argyll, the castle's owner. This was followed in 1912 by a court case, in which the Court of Session ruled that Angus Campbell, the 20th hereditary captain, had right of residence notwithstanding the Duke of Argyll's ownership. Works were delayed by World War I, and the planned total restoration was never completed. In 1958, the 21st captain and the Duke agreed to hand the castle into estate care, and it remains a historic Scotland property. Both the castle and chapel are Category A listed buildings and scheduled ancient monuments. Description: Walls. Dunstaffnage is an irregular quadrangular structure of great strength, with rounded towers at 3 of the angles. It measures approximately 35 by 30 meters, and has a circumference of about 120 meters. The walls are of coarse rubble, with sandstone dressings, and stand up to 18 meters high, including the conglomerate bedrock platform. The walls are up to 3 meters thick, affording strong defense to this highly strategic location, guarding the entrance to Loch Etive and the pass of Brander beyond, and today commanding a splendid view. The parapet walk, which once followed the whole of the walls, has been partially restored with new stone flags. The original parapet is now also gone. Arrow slits, later converted into gun loops, are the only openings. Brass cannon recovered from wrecked vessels of the Spanish Armada were once mounted on the walls. Round towers. Soon after the construction of the castle walls, 3 round towers were built on the north, east, and west towers. The North Tower, or Donhon, is the largest, comprising 3 or 4 stories originally, and probably housed the Lord's private apartments. The West Tower is almost internal, barely projecting beyond the rounded corner of the curtain wall, and could only be entered via the parapet walk. The basement level contains a pit prison which was accessed from above. The East Tower was almost completely rebuilt in the late 15th century as a gatehouse. Each tower was probably once stopped by a conical roof. The gatehouse was built by the Campbells in the late 15th century, replacing an earlier round tower in the east corner. It takes the form of a 4-story hull tower house, with the entrance passage running through half the vaulted basement, the other half forming guardrooms with arrow slits facing the gate. The present approach to the gate is by a stone stair, replacing an earlier drawbridge. The tower was remodeled in the 18th century to provide reception rooms and a private suite. The dormer windows at the top are capped by the pediments from the 1725 house, and bear the date, the Campbell arms, and the initials A.C. in DLC, for Aeneas Campbell, 11th Captain, and his wife Dame Lilias. The pediments were moved here during the 1903 restoration works. Internal ranges. The East Range was located between the North and East Towers, although only foundations remain. This was the principal range of buildings and contained a large hall above vaulted cellars. The hall had double lancet windows decorated with carved patterns, which were later blocked up. Their outlines can be seen in the east curtain wall. A second range stood along the northwest wall, and would have been connected to the hall range by the donjon tower. The ground floor housed a kitchen. In 1725 the range was remodeled into a two-story house, accessed via a stone stair, and topped with the dormer windows which now form part of the gatehouse. The well in front is original, although the large stone surround is of 19th century date. Dunstaffnage Chapel, a ruined 13th century chapel, lies around 150 metres to the southwest of the castle. This was also built by Duncan MacDougall of Lorne as a private chapel, and features detailed stonework of outstanding quality. The chapel is 20 by 6 metres, and formerly had a timber roof. The lancet windows carry dog-tooth carving, and have fine wide splayed arches internally. The chapel was already ruinous in 1740, when a burial aisle was built onto the east end, to serve as a resting place for the captains of Dunstaffnage and the families. Captain of Dunstaffnage. Traditionally, an officer called the hereditary captain of Dunstaffnage is responsible for the castle and its defence. The office still exists, and to retain the title, the incumbent is required to spend 3 nights a year in the castle. No other responsibilities or privileges now attach to the post. Castle ghost. A ghost known as the N.N.E.of of Dunstaffnage is said to haunt the castle. A type of gruagach, the ghost's appearances are said to be associated with events in the lives of the hereditary keepers.